But welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the house it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Being kind is the guys in this mess in the first place.
Put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello, and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. How's everybody doing tonight? As I just increase the exposure just a little bit, so it doesn't look like I am completely in the shadows. Yeah, that's better. So, there's been some interesting doings in this past fucking week. Hey, Adam and Adria. How are you all doing? In particular, since even more Epstein files have been released, a number of people have made some interesting discoveries in the emails. Specifically, that it turns out that a lot of your professional transphobes, your professional pseudoscience transphobes, who have been just bombarding the media in the past decade, really, and just have connections to Epstein. I mean, the thing to know, I was spending time in Britain around the time that this whole thing started there. And it was obvious from the start it couldn't be organic. Because, I mean, other people have done the quantitative number crunching research on this. I'm just reporting it. This is, but trans people were a very occasional preoccupation in the British press for some time, you know, and you had shitty stuff from like Judy Bindel and Judy Burchill, or Julie Bindel and Julie Burchill. Fuck them. They both suck anyway. Hey, Badger. But not a huge amount, and there was a bit of balance in the previous years. And then all of a sudden, in like late 2014, early 2015, around there, suddenly there's this explosion of anti-trans articles in the British press. Across the spectrum, everyone was covering it. Literally, it went up to an average of hundreds of articles a month on trans people. All of them smears, all of them negative shit. And across the ideological spectrum, you know, it wasn't just the Mail and the Express and the Tory Graph and the Times. Yeah, it was the Guardian, it was Morning Star. Like, I mean, papers that generally have kind of a progressive reputation as well, just all over the place all at once. There were these websites, I mean, that's all they were at the time, with names like Fair Play for Women and Woman's Place UK, and all they were was just anonymous WordPress blogs with a whole lot of stock footage, I mean, just stock photos, and no real indication of who was behind them, and tons of just shitty transphobic content. And the thing is, the internet is full of just random people's websites. Having a website, even if you have some very spicy takes on it, that doesn't mean you get attention. But these websites, the weird thing is, like, nobody had heard of any of these fucking groups. They weren't groups, they were just websites, they were anonymous blogs. But suddenly, the British press was giving them the sort of respectful hearing that legit campaigning groups with like millions of members and supporters, groups that could bring a demonstration out on the streets that could shut down central London on fairly short notice, just can only dream of. They were suddenly getting this respectful hearing. They were the ones getting to frame the issue, and it was obvious. It was obvious that this was not organic, because that's just not how any of this works. There was no instigating incident. Nothing had happened around trans people that suddenly meant that you needed hundreds of articles a month smearing trans people in the press. It was wild. But there was no real scrutiny of it in the media. Like, you didn't really have anyone looking into it. There certainly wasn't anyone blowing the whistle in Britain and saying, this is why we're suddenly, getting all this horrible shit about trans people published and stuff. So it was a thing where, and it wasn't that this was a popular viewpoint, particularly in the demographics that these bigots were claiming to represent. Their viewpoint on trans people was definitely a minority view. It was a very unpopular view, except in the media. It was sort of like Brian Eno said about Velvet Underground's first album, how not many people bought it, but everyone who did went out and started a band. It's like, not many people were into the whole TERF bullshit, but every single one had column space in the British media. So the question has always been, when does the other shoe drop? When do we actually start to see what the hell is behind this obvious organized campaign? And in the relevant period, it seems a certain wealthy gentleman who supposedly took his own life in prison was encouraging this sort of stuff. Actually was in contact with a lot of the people who were promoting this stuff. With people like Lawrence Krauss and Robert Trivers, and I don't know, it might be Trivers, it might even be Trivers for all I know. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, I've never heard it pronounced. But really dodgy fucking people and encouraging them to like slag off trans people. And around the same, and this is around a time when Epstein's assets are getting seized. He's really starting to look like he might be in some serious trouble. And around the same time as well, you have all this far-right internet troll farm, Poll on 4chan, which was started by a close acquaintance of his, immediately following a one-on-one meeting with him. And this is, of course, another place where this sort of incitement is originating. In fact, it is from circles like these that we suddenly get, very conveniently for a guy like Epstein, this whole campaign of accusing like everybody of being a groomer except for actual groomers. This whole thing where these like far-right shitheads just go around calling anyone who's queer a groomer, just for being openly queer, which is a very convenient thing if you're a groomer looking to hide in plain sight. And Tim Pool, for example, was big into this. Now, let me just say, I've not seen any sign that Tim Pool is in the Epstein files. But people who are politically very much aligned with the circles that he operates in definitely are. So, so Rebecca Watson had an interesting video that showed up in my recommendations, and it kind of is relevant to all of this, so I thought we might have a little look at that, because there are some other dots that are sort of getting connected here and there, and I want to talk a little bit about this. I mean, this is very much, there's nothing definitive right now, in the sense that people are just starting to dig through this. We have probably millions of pages of documentation that has to be sifted through and evaluated from all sorts of different angles, and you know, dots connected and analyses proposed and examined and everything. So nothing is definitive, but there's interesting stuff. And this video kind of, she doesn't get into this aspect of it, but she does get into one of the figures connected to it. So I thought we'd have a little look at some of that first. This is Rebecca Watson. It's called So I'm in the Epstein Files. Oh, that'll be great. Nobody clip that. I'm dropping the link for the full video here into the chat, and we're just going to have a look at this. Eventually, we will...
Okay, look, I know that here on this channel, I often criticize other prominent people who are behaving in ways that I find abhorrent, accepting dark money and failing to disclose it, producing propaganda for...
Oh, speaking of dark money, it looks like Chorus 2.0 has just dropped. There's some sort of new DNC, Gen Z-oriented propaganda outlet with such Gen Z favorites as Olivia Juliana, who, you know, the teenage centrist, who apparently, like, most of her viewers are 50 plus, but apparently this is the youth vote as far as Chuck Schumer is concerned. But yeah, I'm getting sidetracked.
Oil, silencing critics with phony libel lawsuits, and on and on. And inevitably, when I make a video like that, in the comments, there are people who say that I'm a hypocrite. Nobody's perfect. One day somebody's going to air out my dirty laundry and reveal to the world that I am not so great either.
Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I mean, the intro is good. The whole thing is good. But there are specific things I want to talk about here. And so I'm going to skip ahead and try to look at those specifically. Because this video is mostly about a guy called Lawrence Krauss, a physicist who ended up falling into a certain amount of disgrace because he's a sex pest.
To start to really pay attention. The Daily Beast was doing a lot of really good reporting on this at the time, and one day, and then just come back and spend the night. The victims fought for years after that to get any form of justice, and by 2011, 2 of them made enough headway for international news to start to really pay attention. The Daily Beast was doing a lot of really good reporting on this at the time, and one day in April of 2011, a reader of my blog, Skepchick, emailed me a piece in the Daily Beast about how Epstein's high society buddies were circling the wagons.
Okay, this is... Okay, I'm just going to look at this real quick. So we've got, on the evening of December 2nd, 2010, a handful of America's media and entertainment elite, including TV anchors Katie Couric and George Stephanopoulos, Bill Clinton operative, comedian Chelsea Handler, who I don't remember, and director Woody Allen, shithead and sex pest, who married his daughter, as normal guys who aren't at all creepy do, convened around the dinner table of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
And the reader specifically wanted me to weigh in on a quote from...
Now he was hosting a party for Britain's Prince Andrew.
Lawrence Krauss, a relatively famous theoretical physicist who often appeared at skeptic and atheist events and whose work was in part funded by Epstein. If any...
Okay, now we're getting into the stuff I actually wanted to look at the video for. I do have a tendency to digress, I'm sorry. Hopefully I digress interestingly.
The unfortunate period he suffered has caused him to really think about what he wants to do with his money and his time and support knowledge, says Krauss. Jeffrey has surrounded himself with beautiful women and young women, but they're not as young as the ones that were claimed. As a scientist, I always judge things on empirical evidence, and he always has women ages 19 to 23 around him, but I've never seen anything else. So as a scientist, my presumption is that whatever the problems were, I would believe him over other people. Though
Okay, so that's Lawrence Krauss.
Colleagues have criticized him over his relationship with Epstein. Krauss insists, I don't feel tarnished in any way by my relationship with Jeffrey. I feel raised by it.
Okay, yes. I mean, let's note that this is before Lawrence Krauss was exposed as a sex pest in his own right.
I was shocked when I read that quote for the first time. I did not know Krauss well at that point, but I had been at conferences with him and attended his lectures, and I was absolutely positive that this quote must have been taken out of context by a nefarious reporter. So I emailed him to get the context and a correction. I wrote, Dear Professor Krauss, we met briefly after your talk in Ithaca a few months ago. I'm the girl in the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe podcast. I've really enjoyed your talks and books, but I was surprised to see you quoted in the Daily Beast recently
These are all emails from the Epstein files.
Jeffrey Epstein. Can you confirm if the following quote, the one I just read, is accurate? Thanks, Rebecca Watson. Krauss replied pretty quickly, writing, Yes, it is. Based on my direct experience with Jeffrey, which is all I can base my assessment on, he is a...
Which is already wild, right? So his direct experience with Jeffrey is all he can base his assessment on, like... Other people have also been in a room with him. Some of them have said very detailed things by the time that he's written this. But he's just going to go by the fact that there was nothing obviously criminal going on in the room when he was in it, at least according to what he says.
A thoughtful, kind, considerate man who is generous to his friends, and all of the women I have known who have been associated with Jeffrey speak glowingly in the same words. Why are you asking?
Gee, I wonder.
This was my face as I read that. And let me be absolutely clear. We know way more today about the horror of Epstein's crime against young girls than we knew back then. But
that is true. The trafficking stuff had not come out. Somebody who's in touch with him at that time, peripherally, does not necessarily know that about him. They might know that about him, but it isn't something that is public knowledge that can just be assumed that, like these days, the name Epstein has been, like, well and truly fucking ruined, and I do feel bad for the large number of people who are totally unrelated to him but happen to have the same name because it's kind of a common Jewish surname. Because of that, but now you could not possibly say you didn't know, for the past, 7 years, I guess? 2018 or so was when that all came out. So at that time, he was a dodgy fucker, but not as dodgy, but he was not known to be as dodgy as he was, a few years later.
back then in 2011, decent people all knew quite enough to be disgusted by him. He already pled guilty to raping a minor, and the court...
And got an absolute joke of a plea deal.
Documents were damning. So I replied thusly, "Thanks for getting back to me. I was asking because I found the quote shocking. The evidence against Epstein is overwhelming, and he's even pled guilty to paying for sex with a minor."
Yeah, I mean, and here's the other thing about this. It's like, yeah, plea bargains are bullshit. But usually when you have somebody who's a billionaire, they're not taking a plea because they don't expect to get a fair shake from the justice system. This motherfucker did not have a court-appointed lawyer. He had, he could afford a legal team that could potentially, if they saw any way of doing it... Oh, link spam, we're getting rid of that link spam. Yeah, goodbye, link spam. I guess I'm moving up in the world if I get link spam. Except I've been getting it all along, so probably not. But, I mean, this is somebody who can afford the kind of defense lawyers that prosecutors are afraid of. That cops do not like to appear in court to deal with, because they potentially get utterly humiliated, because he can also afford the kind of investigators that can dig up the kind of shit that you could find on pretty much any fucking cop. So if he's taking a plea, that's not because he just doesn't think he's going to get a fair shake in the justice system. he's taking a plea because it is a less embarrassing option for him than having everything they have on him aired in open court and hoping he could discredit a little bit of it.
It's in no way scientific or rational to assume that because you never saw him with an underage girl, he must actually be innocent. It is possible for a person to be kind and generous with his friends, but still a criminal paying for sex with underage girls in his private life.
Yeah. Except the thing is, when I didn't have anybody watching my streams, link spammers were there. Maybe I'm being unfair to link spammers because they've been there all along for me ever since I started a stream. Though it doesn't really suggest that they're very good at link spamming. Because when I had like 0 viewers, like what the fuck are they? How many clicks are they gonna get off a stream with no viewers? And they're always advertising it as if they can help you get views, and it's like, obviously you can't. You're advertising on my stream. But yeah, I mean, the whole way that the Krauss defense there is just why it's like the man has no object permanence. Epstein ceases to exist when he's not in the presence of Lawrence Krauss.
I'm going to write about the topic on Skeptic, and I'll include...
Well, good question, Badger. Because here's the thing. It's like, the first stuff that was released... Okay, there were like 2 phases, and my opinion shifted a fair bit as a result of them. I mean, he'd already said something kind of shitty, actually a couple of years ago, was when it turned out he had taken this one flight to New York on Epstein's plane to meet with the creepy motherfucker Woody Allen and have dinner with him in New York. And he said some things that I really did not find particularly impressive with, which was basically none of your, somebody asked him to comment, and he said it's none of your fucking business, and just referred to Woody Allen as a great artist. And, when it was just that, and a few very short and curt emails, the thing to know about Noam Chomsky back before his stroke is that the man was, if you don't know this is something well known about him, he would answer anybody's fucking emails. Like, prompt, detailed, long answers. Like, I emailed him years ago, and we had actually a fairly, not a very lengthy correspondence, but, his emails were always 2 or 3 pages long. So when I'm looking at what was initially released, the first things that come out that just jump out to me are, it's always Epstein initiating the conversation, and Chomsky's responses are always quite short. So to me, at that point, I was like, okay, so he's actually dedicating less time to Epstein than he dedicated to my fucking emails, and he doesn't know who the hell I am several years ago. So I'm not going to I don't feel like we can make too much of this, especially because he's had the stroke and now he can't actually respond. But then, since then, with some of these new releases, I feel rather differently, I have to say. Because there was an email that has come out, and it was actually a long, substantive email, and it was remarkably shitty, where it was essentially Epstein asking Chomsky how to deal with the fact that he was being charged with fucking running a pedo ring. And Chomsky's like, yeah, man, I just ignore that. And then and it's like, okay, and that kind of sucked. But already, that sucked. But then he goes into how there is hysteria over the abuse of women. And other stuff, and it's like, yeah, man, fuck you. Honestly, it does not change the fact that he's done some very worthwhile things in his life. But fuck him. That's bull. There was no excuse for that. Apparently, one of the wild things about these releases is that there were email threads that had to do with internal disputes within his family over trust funds that had to be distributed and stuff, and they were seeking Epstein's help in. And so you get a whole bunch of stuff about internal financial strife in the Chomsky family as well, which seems to also coincide with when he is also more receptive and more responsive to Epstein as well. But still, I mean, that sucked. I mean, he has had some absolutely shitty takes, and he has occasionally made some really fucked decisions about who to connect himself with. I mean, one notorious one was when he gave an interview to Hustler. And actually, in that particular case, somebody asked him about it. He said, he didn't know who the journo was, but if he'd known what he knew afterwards, he probably wouldn't have taken the interview. But, he's had shitty takes in the past. I mean, he's spent so long having takes, it's not surprising some of them suck. But that sucked. That was fucked up, actually. And I do think it's unfortunate, though, that he's had this stroke and he can't talk and he can't write. So we don't get to hear what he has to say for himself at this point, because I would like to know. But it doesn't. I think I would have to say what he said sucks. I mean, remaining connected to this asshole sucks, actually. There's no evidence that he ever actually went anywhere with him other than this thing in New York, the dinner with sex pest Woody Allen, which also isn't great. Woody Allen was already kind of well known to be a really dodgy prick by then. I mean, he was married to his fucking daughter, which, I mean, is kind of a tell. And he had arranged a meeting with Ehud Barak, the war criminal and former Israeli prime minister, at one point. Supposedly, the idea there was to get Barak's take on the Taba talks at the turn of the century that Clinton had organized, to essentially get confirmation that it had been Israel to torpedo the talks, since they were kind of the closest thing to some sort of actual permanent territorial deal between the entity and the Palestinians. But yeah, on the whole, that really sucked. That absolutely, that sucked. That was fucked up. I lost a lot of respect for him when I saw that email, the more recent one. Okay, so back to Lawrence Krauss, who is using his apparent lack of object permanence to explain why he doesn't believe that Epstein's a creep.
Any additional statement you'd like if you want to provide more context or if you've changed your mind.
Okay, so Rebecca Watson is providing Krauss with kind of a lifeline here. To kind of, I mean, she's just saying, look, that quote of yours is a really bad fucking look, and if you would like to kind of rearrange the shreds of your dignity on yourself, I'm happy to help you do it. He declined the offer.
Proceeded to double down, replying, Jeffrey apparently paid for massages with sex. I believe him when he told me he had no idea the girls were underage, and I doubt that people normally are asked for or present a driver's license under such circumstances. Moreover, I also believe that Jeffrey is an easy target for those who want to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, those billionaires are such easy targets. I mean, yeah, they can't catch a fucking break. Right.
Moreover, I can say with great honesty that Jeffrey's time in prison led him to seriously examine his life in very positive ways, and I don't believe in blanket condemnations of people. He served time for something that was determined was inappropriate.
Yeah. This is worse.
I honestly don't know who was the victim in this case.
Who could it possibly be?
That these masseuses knew what they were doing and were not swayed to do anything with Jeffrey that they were not already doing. That is not to approve of the whole behavior, but lots of people I know and have behavior I don't entirely approve of.
Some people, they have speeding tickets. They got a lead foot. And some people, are exploiting underage girls who have been forced into sex work.
No, it is not politically correct to say that, because in general this is a very sensitive issue, and all other things being equal, one should take the side of the young women. But all things are not equal in this case, from my point of view.
Yeah, all things were not equal, but not in the way he means it.
It is a judgment call, and I will not turn my back on a good friend so easily. At this point, two things became clear to me. One, Lawrence Krauss is either a monster or an idiot, possibly both. And two, Lawrence Krauss's book editor doesn't get paid enough, because the man writes like a teenager.
Okay, so we're gonna skip ahead because there's more. There's more. And again, we're not watching the whole thing here, but we're gonna watch at least some of it, because this is set up. Because there's other shit that
if I'm honest,
comes into this.
Let me back up a bit. As most people know by now, in 2008, Jeffrey Epstein was first jailed for raping dozens of girls as young as 13, with, one of those girls in particular being part of the final plea he made. Despite the severity of his crime.
And it's worth noting, when we talk about the transphobes that he encouraged, that one of his first victims to come forward, possibly his first victim to actually go public, was a trans woman. And she got utterly savaged in the press. I mean, she was just smeared constantly. And then he settled out of court with her for like 28 grand. Which, he's a fucking billionaire. 28 grand is what he's got in his couch cushions. So, we know a couple of things from that. One is that he's a chaser. Or, well, he was a chaser. Fucker's dead now. Fuck him. And the other thing is that he has a direct interest, and guys like him recognize that they have a direct interest in smearing and disenfranchising trans women in particular.
He managed to secure a sweetheart deal that allowed him to only serve 13 months in what was essentially a state-sponsored hotel, which he was allowed to leave every day, and then just come back and spend the night.
Yeah, this is what Krauss is talking about with his time in prison. He literally did not have to spend anything except the nights in there.
The victims fought for years after that to get any form of justice, and by 2011, two of them made enough headway for international news to start to really pay attention. The Daily Beast was doing a lot of really good reporting on this at the time.
Okay, I'm going to... let's see... I'm skipping some more, because this is a long video. Yeah, actually, this is just stuff we already saw.
Printed in full along with the article.
This is her response to Krauss deciding to throw the shreds of his dignity asunder and go on the record with an even worse statement than the one he'd already given.
Probably today. I very, very strongly disagree with your position and hope you eventually reconsider, but I do appreciate you taking the time to respond. In a sudden glimmer of self-awareness, Krauss agreed to this, but had a second thought of a way to make him look slightly less terrible. He wrote, "Okay, I just sent an additional email which moderates this. Everyone was a victim, including Jeffrey here.
Oh, yeah.
And there was no happy resolution. Please add, probably everyone was a victim with no happy resolution or consequences of these activities after was the victim in this case." Oh.
Does that make him less horrible, though? I think, there are two ways to read that. One is that the man has absolutely no concept of right and wrong, or does not give a fuck. And the other is that he does not even comprehend... the other is that he's just completely full of shit. And there is room for both.
Okay, I thought that was fair, so I made those edits and published the post roundly condemning Krauss for his disgusting victim blaming in the service of protecting a billionaire who ran an international child sex trafficking ring. Because I had a lot of male skeptics and atheists in my community, many comments actually supported Krauss. Like a lot of men who wanted to argue that it's not rape if the child isn't super young, or that it's actually libel to say that there was ample evidence to suggest that Epstein was in fact a child sex trafficker. Or this
Okay.
comment downplaying a middle-aged man raping a child from DJ Grothy, who at the time was...
I mean, obviously, global content warning for this. I really... fucking hell. I'm sorry, I really... to anyone who needed one, I really should have said that in the first place. But, yeah, I mean, we're going to get into some fucked up shit. Although, on a certain level, it's like, when do we not? Because, like, it's just a bombardment of fucked up shit of one kind or another every day.
Running the James Randi Educational Foundation, and who was hosting Krauss a few months later as a featured speaker at their annual...
Oh, wait a second. Oh! Holy shit. Okay, this is a thing I did not notice. And this actually answers a question that I had. Because, okay, in the 1980s, there was a really, really dodgy little lobby group called the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. It was started by some, like, child sex abusers, and it had some leading members who were connected with MK Ultra. And their whole thing was using a fake diagnosis to discredit people who had come forward about having been sexually abused as children. Okay. And now, Epstein was very much active in the 1980s. I mean, he actually had, like, I think it was a GQ or Esquire cover photo in 1980 as, like, the most eligible bachelor or some shit. So he was active at this time. At the same time, the FMSF was active. And so one thing I was kind of curious about is, how many degrees of Epstein are there between this organization that absolutely was very much involved in doing the sort of work that he would want to do in terms of discrediting people who come forward having been abused, and what do you fucking know? Elizabeth Loftus, appearing alongside Lawrence Krauss and Richard Dawkins. Elizabeth Loftus was one of the leading people in the False Memory Syndrome Foundation. And she popularized what is often incorrectly described as a study proving that there is this false memory syndrome. What she did, but what it actually was an undergraduate extra credit project. There was, okay, there's a link that I have to get you. I'm gonna drop this in chat for anyone who's not familiar with these extremely dodgy people. There's an excellent article, and it gets into all of this. So, yeah. So this undergraduate project tried to determine, it told people using close family members that tried to implant a false memory. The false memory being something to do with getting lost in a shopping center as a child. Which, I mean, the first thing that should absolutely jump out at you is how common memories like that are. That's not an unusual thing at all to happen. So how could you possibly screen to make sure there was nothing like that somebody could remember? That somebody could be actually remembering? I mean... But then the other thing is, as this article points out, they didn't actually ask people to rate how convinced they were that this memory was true. This memory that may well have been associated in their heads with a real memory of getting lost in a shop or a shopping center or some other big public space like that. Because that's something that happens to a lot of people as children. I know I had one or two like that. I'm sure everybody has had some version of it. And you don't necessarily remember all the details, especially if you're young enough that you can't read. So okay. So all that they actually asked these people to rate was how clear their, supposed recollection of this was. Ja, hallo Lyrik 1010. So nobody ever actually asked whether they believed it was true. And now other scientists pointed out that there was a problem here. Namely, the problem that I just pointed out, that anyone looking at this probably also notices, namely that this is a ubiquitous, very common childhood memory, and how could you possibly make sure that you got, subjects who had never had the experience of getting lost in a shopping center or similar place as children. So what they decided to do is repeat the study, but instead they decided to go with something that was a little bit better surrogate for sexual abuse. Which involved, so they started to tried to implant a story in their subjects about having received an extremely painful enema as children. And it didn't work. Like, literally nobody was even the slightest bit convinced that this was a real thing, even when it was coming from family members. People said things like, no fucking way. It's all in the article that I linked there very well. But that's Elizabeth Loftus. So Elizabeth Loftus is here sharing, and she's also connected with some of the other dodgy transphobe people. I mean, I haven't heard her do specifically transphobic stuff, but she was presented as some sort of victim of academic standards by Alex Drager in a book she wrote with Guggenheim Foundation money to vindicate a scumbag we will hear about more, called J. Michael Bailey from Northwest University, who wrote an extremely shitty transphobic book in 2006, 2007, called The Man Who Would Be Queen, that was mostly a vindication of shitheads like Ray Blanchard, who invented autogynephilia, and Kenneth Zucker, who is a big conversion therapy fan and also published a study where he looked at how sexually attractive trans children are in the opinion of his undergraduates. Like, I mean, totally normal stuff. Totally normal stuff. And, I mean, no red flags there at all. I mean, not more than you'd see on May Day in North Korea, anyway. So seeing Elizabeth Loftus's name there, that's, okay, that answers a question I had.
Annual meeting in Las Vegas. Probably just a coincidence that Grothy decided to accuse me of making Epstein's guilt more black and white than it really was. Also probably a coincidence that the following year, Grothy blamed me personally for women not wanting to go to his conference anymore because I'm here. Grothy blamed black and white.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, check out the second to last paragraph in this comment from Grothy, where this person says that age 13 is below the age of consent in his book, but 16 or 7 isn't necessarily so. Like, I mean, yeah, if in his book, like, this is something that he could see debate on.
Than it really was. Also probably a coincidence that the following year, Grothy blamed me personally for women not wanting to go to his conference anymore because I made them believe that women would be unsafe because we feature this or that man on the program. That said, most of the commenters seem to feel the same as me, expressing disappointment and disgust with Krauss. He was extremely annoyed with this reaction, writing in the comments that he was actually disappointed in our lack of skepticality. He goes on to say, I have read numerous reports of orgies on
This is important.
Jeffrey's Island involving me and other scientists during our meetings. Orgies that never happened. I am very skeptical of other claims on his behavior. I found that really interesting because I didn't mention any reports of Krause being on Jeffrey's Island, let alone participating in orgies, because I had never heard of any reports.
Yeah, this was this was before a lot of that stuff even came out. So what the fuck's he talking about? Why is he wearing the t-shirt that dispels the accusation nobody has yet directed at him?
Like that. He just volunteered it. Getting out ahead of it, I guess. Anyway, in one final clarifying comment, Krause wrote, I was not going to comment further, but a dear friend has asked me to make my position even clearer.
Yeah, and this is not going to go well.
He then restates that he doesn't think Epstein did anything wrong, ending his comment with, as some of you know, I just wrote a book about Richard Feynman, and as I thought about the derision on the web, I remember his statement, what do you care what other people think? I think he would have done the same thing I have done if he assessed the situation as I have. Now, at the time, I didn't think much of his continued hole digging.
Yeah, I mean, and she skipped over a bit here, where he goes, I condemn the acts that have been described in the media, but I don't believe Jeffrey did them. But elsewhere, he had said that he did, but didn't think they were so bad.
Certainly didn't wonder which dear friend asked him to make his position clearer. But now, after perusing the 20,000 previously unseen emails to and from Jeffrey Epstein, I kind of think that's the dear friend. Because that's how I ended up in a historic public document drop. Immediately after he replied to my emails, Lawrence Krause forwarded our conversation to the famous child sex trafficker himself, writing, just so you know, you can read from bottom up.
Here's how I defended you.
May be mad that I was blunt, haven't heard from you, hope all is well. No, it was appreciated, thanks, replied Jeffrey Epstein. In a reply that caused me unintentional full-body cringe, Lawrence Krause ass-kissed, beyond anything else, you are my friend. I hope we can both always remember that, no matter what. Are you coming this weekend at all? No,
okay, no, that last question, I can't take that.
I am in Paris, thanks, replied the pedophile. In another email, Epstein complained, what evidence? No real sex. Where is she getting her so-called facts? For the record, I got my so-called facts from his Florida court case. Also, what exactly is real sex? Is that the kind you have with consenting adults? Because, yeah...
Well, maybe it's only real sex to Jeffrey if, it's enjoyable for the other person, and he never had sex like that. So, he's never had real sex. Just a possibility.
Like there was much real sex. Just rape.
Yeah,
anyway, Krause needed
exactly.
Epstein to know that he was a victim too. People are now throwing out my books, according to her blog. More nonsense. Poor guy. You know, come to think of it, he was right when he said probably everyone is a victim. Epstein, Trump, Krause, other rich white guys probably, they're all victims. He then writes, P.S. I have decided that Feynman would have done what I did, and I am therefore content.
Wow, that is such a wild thing. So he's decided that a dead guy would have done what he did, and since he personally himself decided that this dead guy would have done what he did, he's decided he's cool.
No matter what, smiley face. So would I, replied the child sex trafficker. Krause concludes, I know. It is one of the reasons I respect you. Now this...
fucking hell.
This exchange in particular has caused a bit of confusion online. In the skeptic
that
he made at the same time, Krause does cite Feynman's quip, what do you care what other people think? Or Feynman's wife's quip, whatever. But it was still unclear. What exactly did Krause do in this Epstein case that he thinks Feynman, a notorious ladies' man, and it's worth noting, wife beater, what would Feynman also have done in this situation? When someone recently asked...
it's always the people you most suspect.
Krause about it in a now deleted post on Blue Sky, Krause replied, defend an unpopular friend. He did it numerous times. He did not appear to reply to any of the many comments asking him to expand upon why Epstein was unpopular. Still, it got me to thinking, okay, maybe Krause really did mean that Feynman famously defended unpopular friends, and not that Feynman famously loves sexually harassing young women.
Okay, so I mostly wanted to bring that in because I wanted to establish a little bit for anyone who is unfamiliar who Lawrence Krauss is. Because there's another aspect. She doesn't get into it here. Maybe she will. She's actually done some pretty good stuff on transphobic grifters and shit like that. And she's clearly interested in following up on this, because this is not her only video on the subject. But when she does, here's one of the things that maybe might get brought in. This is okay. Hang on. My mouse is being annoying. This is from the Trans News Network. I'm going to drop the link in chat right now. Okay, here we go. This is Epstein-backed billionaire's dinner network of prominent anti-trans figures. Lawrence Krauss, Richard Dawkins, Steven Pinker, and other anti-trans influencers personally benefited from a right-wing academic social group backed by infamous human trafficker Jeffrey Epstein, sometimes meeting at his island. And I have to say, I'm never surprised by any shitty thing I hear about Steven Pinker, because the man has asshole hair. For anyone not familiar, he's the guy on the right there, in more ways than one. And here he is with Epstein Krauss, I think that is. Yeah, that's Lawrence Krauss. And his asshole haircut. I've never seen a dude with this particular haircut who isn't, like, just a shithead. And Steven Pinker is one. Okay, so... Now, many of those associates of scumbag nonce extraordinaire Jeffrey Epstein were part of a group called Edge.org, an atheist organization run by literary agent John Brockman and bankrolled by Epstein, which served as a loose predecessor for the far-right intellectual dark web. And now, looking back, you just notice things that you didn't notice the first time, but the fact that they immediately jumped to dark web, which has a very particular significance for guys like Epstein. As a source of all sorts of things that they might want to use their crypto for. But it didn't pass. I didn't notice that at the time. I don't remember anyone else noticing it at the time. But in retrospect, it's like, During the research for this article, Trans News Network uncovered at least 8 prominent anti-trans figures affiliated with Edge or the IDW, Intellectual Dark Web, who received support from Epstein or even visited his island, often through connections with Brockman or physicist Lawrence Krauss. Oh, hey, Badger, sorry, I only just noticed your message. Only when you have a second can you say the name of this content creator. That is Rebecca Watson. That is Rebecca Watson, who does some very good stuff in the skeptic space, and in particular has been one of the people in the skeptic space to really, one of various people, but the one that comes to mind right now, to deal with the fact that there are a lot of bigots, misogynists, and sex pests that are prominent in the skeptic space. Which is why, like, Richard Dawkins in particular has the shits with her. The IDW is a loosely defined group of scientists and other figures who have made careers from attacking perceived wokeness in higher education and the media. In practice, this involves encouraging hatred against trans people and other marginalized groups, often Muslims. They often denounce university processes against sexual harassment and discrimination on the dubious grounds of academic freedom. Okay, so skipping over. Okay, here we go. Where is the thing that I was looking for? Well, Leon Blog. I'm trying to find the thing that, okay, I was specifically looking at. Okay, here we go. While he has long denied many of the allegations from his time at ASU, Krauss admitted to and even tried to justify gratuitous sexual comments about trans women he made around co-workers, in one later removed section of his retirement letter. He also heavily included a grade school sketch of a light bulb that he drew in front of colleagues. Since Krauss's retirement from academia and, hopefully, sketch art, Epstein continued to advise and fund him as he pivoted to building an anti-trans podcast on his YouTube channel and accompanying Substack, where he's interviewed a large number of TERFs and other anti-trans figures, including other Epstein associates like Richard Dawkins. But Krauss's admiration for Epstein grew... let me see. Because what we want to talk about isn't his we know his admiration for Epstein. We've just been hearing about that shit. We're looking for the TERF stuff. Okay. Just weeks before Epstein's arrest and 2 months before his alleged suicide, Epstein advised Krauss to take his podcast in a more reactionary direction, encouraging him to lean into his identity as a provocateur. Epstein finished the conversation by offering his support, quote, "As you know, I truly hope this works for you. So I'm looking forward to see the results." In the years since 2019, Krauss has followed that advice, growing his Epstein-funded podcast considerably. He's brought on a number of anti-trans activists and scientists as guests, such as Carlene Gribble, Judith Suissa, Alice Sullivan, Sabine Hossenfelder, and Kathleen fucking Stock. Each one of these transphobic influencers, Kathleen Stock, has been a major source of anti-trans incitement in Britain. She likes to present herself as a free speech victim when she's not busy, well, getting interviewed by all of the media. Each one of these transphobic influencers have come on his show despite the fact that it has been public knowledge for many years that Krauss was a close affiliate of Epstein and was forced into retirement from academia due to sexual harassment allegations. Many anti-trans activists earn a living by spreading propaganda against trans people, often in the name of science or women's rights, despite plainly working against both. Coming on his show elevates their careers and... yeah. Okay. Come on. Okay, here we go. Another reason transphobic influencers don't mind platforming Krauss is much simpler. They couldn't avoid Epstein's associates if they tried. Krauss was hardly the only anti-trans activist affiliated with Epstein. Okay, so Dawkins... yeah. The year after his invite to the island, Dawkins alerted Brockman, which he forwarded to Epstein, to Rebecca Watson's criticism of Krauss mentioned earlier in the article, referring to the atheist blogger as a rather nasty young woman who was running some kind of witch hunt against Lawrence Krauss because of his defense of Jeffrey Epstein. Watson responded to the new information. Oh, yeah. Steven Pinker, okay. Who, Andrea James describes as a central figure in anti-transgender extremism going back to the early 2000s. Oh, and here we go, quoted in I did not realize he was quoted in Bailey's book. J. Michael Bailey is dodgy as hell, and anytime you see his name associated with anything, especially anything to do with queer people, it's a scam. It's bullshit, and it's going to be bad, and it's just like incitement and libel. Okay, Robert Trivers. Now, Robert Trivers is interesting because when you look him up, you find that he's published a lot in a journal called Archives of Sexual Behavior. Archives of Sexual Behavior is dodgy as shit. It is a house organ of guys like Ray Blanchard, Kenneth Zucker, and J. Michael Bailey, and has been used to launder their discredited transphobic pseudoscience for years. So, being published there, I mean, when J. Michael Bailey got criticized because his book was like a fucking fraudulent piece of shit that misrepresented the science, and he was also criticized because he sexually exploited research subjects, which he later admitted to doing. It was in the Archives of Sexual Behavior that Alice Drager published a 60-page long article trying to defend him and present him to be some sort of like Socrates-like figure who is just being martyred for his academic freedom. The emails reveal Trivers' interest in studying trans people is primarily motivated by his sexual fetishization of trans women and Epstein's financial and verbal encouragement to study trans people. So when you say, so Trivers is connected through the Archives of Sexual Behavior, ASB, to Bailey, Blanchard, Lawrence, and Zucker. And again, I mentioned Zucker earlier. Zucker is, I mean, he is dodgy as shit. And he's a conversion therapy advocate, which is why he got sacked from the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto, which used to be known as Jurassic Clark. And if you look up Jurassic Clark, you will find testimonies of trans women who went through hell back when that was the only way to get transition-related care subsidized through the provincial healthcare system in Ontario. It wasn't long before Trivers' research, more defendant than ever on Epstein's support, took a much darker and overtly fetishistic tone. On more than one occasion, he sent emails to Epstein that included perverted trans-misogynistic rhetoric familiar to any trans person who has encountered chasers, misogynistic cis people, usually men who have an obsessive desire to have sex with trans people because of their genitals. Yeah, I mean, so basically, all of this very obviously non-organic attack on trans people in the past decade, I mean, Epstein was up to his ass in it. People connected with Epstein were all over it, as they claimed that trans women were the people that children needed to be protected from. Now, let's see, other intellectual dork web. Sam Harris. I mean, the thing is, if he made it his work for people to throw away superstition and seek science to better understand the fabric of reality, I think most of the people who have legitimate criticisms of him would no longer have those. The trouble is, he sort of abandoned science a long time ago. He hasn't done actual scientific work since, I think, the 1980s. And since then, his big thing has been slagging off Muslims. I mean, and also just being extremely misogynistic. Oh, the Free Press founders. The Free Press as in Barry Weiss's white nationalist hoax website that was bought by CBS for $150 million. which is getting on for like 150 times earnings. Like all-time earnings. Okay. And Epstein was, of course, personally transphobic. Okay, so there we go. I wanted to talk about that because this is an aspect of the files that is very important, is helping to shed light on something that a lot of people have been trying to make sense out of for a while now. Namely, where this fucking campaign came from just out of nowhere in about 2015 in Britain and a little bit later in the US. Like, I mean, this explosion of transphobia from the top that was not in any way related to, you know, popular sentiment. In fact, popular sentiment was largely against it. And, yeah, so Epstein seems to have had a hand in that. Yeah, racist, woman hater, like, big fucking Zionist. Oh, we're talking about Dawkins. I don't know if he is a Zionist, actually, now that we're talking about Epstein. But, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he was one, let me put it that way. I have not actually heard him say anything about it, but it would be consistent with the rampant Islamophobia. Now, we lost somebody last week, Michael Parenti. I'm sure a lot of you probably heard about this in chat, or I mean, and also people who are watching this on the VOD. Michael Parenti is somebody who I have a number of disagreements with over on the whole, but he's also somebody who was very important to my own radicalization in the 1990s. I read one of like the first like political books I really read would have been Against Empire back in the late 90s, and I still remember like my main memory of Against Empire was sitting at this bus stop after not getting a shitty job, waiting for the bus, which was taking forever, and this dude sits next to me, sees what I'm reading, and he also, I mean, does not look like he's particularly having a good economic time of it. This is, again, we're talking late 90s, early 2000s, I don't remember exactly. But anyway, and he looks at it and is like, yeah, but you know, Empire is why we got everything we got. And it's like, motherfucker, you riding the bus. And it's not even a good bus system. I think there's somebody else who's benefiting more from this than you are. But, so somebody put together Michael Parenti's funniest moments. And I looked at a few of these last night, and they are legit fucking hilarious. We're not gonna get to see the whole thing, but I thought Chemical Minds compiled this, and it's worth watching. And we just sat, you know, talked about some really shitty, fucked up things. And I thought we could just look at some of the funniest moments in Michael Parenti's public speaking career, which are legit just fucking hilarious. So that's what we're gonna do for the last 10 or so minutes. And yeah, I just dropped the link in chat if you want to see the whole thing.
I'm Michael Parenti, a political writer, author, and noted after-dinner raconteur.
When I was a kid, I rooted for the Cowboys, kill those Indians, and if one of the human beings inside the wagon train got an arrow in him, oh, get that arrow out, you know, that was hurting, that hurt him. But those other things, you just kill them, knock them off their horses as quick as possible. Yeah, we got that stuff. All of us, by the way, have those images in us to some degree, right? All I gotta tell you about the mafia jokes I hear from my politically progressive friends. As an Italian American, I'm supposed to think that's funny. And it's not funny.
Yeah. It's funny, we were talking about, I mean, Badger brought up Chomsky and the fucked up things we've learned about him, and it's just kind of... Oh, on a certain level, I'm glad to hear it went quickly. Because it means that people were, it means you were into it, and that's kind of part of my goal in all of this. But, like, Chomsky was absolutely, huge in my political development. I mean, I don't know, I've probably not read everything he's written, but I read a lot of it. Like, and the thing is, despite the fucked up things we now know about him, a lot of it actually is still actually quite important work. But, I mean, I'd never seen Michael Parenti speak before. I'd seen Chomsky speak a lot. I'd read Parenti, I'd never seen him speak. And their styles could not be more different.
Saddam Hussein, the butcher of Baghdad, a madman, a beast, worse than Hitler. Do you remember George Bush? George Bush was saying that about him. Saddam Hussein is worse than Hitler. In a dynamic, fiery way. Georgie, do it to me. Oh, wow, you just set me on fire, Georgie. You just... The free market core mythology to which both political parties in this country and just about all mainstream commentators are wedded to argues in effect that, and here I'm kind of paraphrasing John Maynard Keynes, because he said this too about free market capitalism. The free market mythology, it argues that the most ruthless, selfish, opportunistic, greedy, calculating plunderers, applying the most heartless measures in cold-blooded pursuit of corporate interests and wealth accumulation, will produce the best results for all of us. Through something called the invisible hand.
Mankind is mankind.
Okay. For people who aren't familiar with Parenti and want to get an idea of what he was all about, this is apparently considered one of his most important lectures that he ever gave. It's called the Yellow Lecture, I'm not sure why. From 1986. And I'm going to drop the link in chat while we watch.
And no matter what system you have, socialism...
Why did you call on this guy?
Did you catch him, what he said? It picked up on the way he said, why did you call on this guy?
Capitalism.
In Democracy for the Few, I have a line where I say, the trick to getting rich is not to work hard, but to get others to work hard for you. And then I got a little snot letter from a student out on the West Coast saying, Dear Dr. Parenti, on page such and such, and he quotes this. I could see him snickering with his fraternity friends as he wrote the letter and saying, I think that's very good advice as to how to get rich, and I would like to get rich. Do you have any further advice as to how I can exploit others and get them to work hard for me so that I could get rich? And he signed it. I've decided I'm not going to debate these people anymore. I write serious letters, I give serious responses. But to this letter, his name was Ted something, so I just wrote on it. I said, Dear Teddy, some asshole sent me this letter and signed your name to it.
Like, that is just such a classic way to respond. I've received lots of shitty messages in my day. I kind of wish I had that template because I could have gotten so much use out of it.
And I fold it and send it back to you.
Some asshole sent this letter and signed your name on it.
Which I don't think is the response he was expecting. But I said, and this is my answer, I would wear that label proudly if I knew that you understood what I meant by Marxist. And when somebody like Reed Irvine says, you're a Marxist, aren't you, whose only intention is to give a buzzword which says this guy drinks the blood of the capitalist children or something, then I'm going to say, no, I'm not your label. I don't particularly want your label. That was why I deferred from later Marxist. And you see, there's something about saying Marxist when I write a book about the media. And you remember the point I made. I said, look, I wrote the book about the media. I don't know what Karl Marx has to say about 20th century U.S. media. I think he had very little to say because, you know, he left early. But there's been a lot of creative thought and scholarship in Marxist literature and whatever else, and I feel that it's like a scholasticist thing. Oh, you took your formula and you applied it here. I don't see these things that way because I'm a Marxist. Just the opposite. I started seeing these things, and then I began realizing that there was an analysis that had explanatory power for that.
What he just said there, I see. We've gotten to the part where I haven't actually seen it, so I don't know what the punchline's about to be. That is what so many people get wrong. They think, oh, you started out with, like, you know, whatever kind of camo shit you're into, and therefore you came up with the idea that this is how it works. And it's like, no, I noticed this is how it works, and then somebody pointed out there's a theory that actually makes sense out of that, and it's like, oh, okay, well then I want to know more about that fucking theory. So many people get that backwards.
It gets very frustrating. You know, for years I'd knock myself out trying to make an analysis. I'd come to the conclusion, I'd say, hey, you know, the police are not neutral. They're on the side of property and power. And somebody would say to me, that's a Marxist. Yeah, you sound like a Marxist. A Marxist? Oh. And then I said, hey, you know, wealth is largely unaccountable in many of the things it does in our democracy. I don't understand. That isn't what I learned. That's a Marxist point of view. That's Marx said that, you know. And it would go on, one thing after another. Every time I said, boy, this Karl Marx was really something, you know. Every time I put two and two together and come up with a good analysis, they give him the credit for it.
And Keynes really, he mocked that too. He didn't have as many adjectives as I did, but he said, how do they think that the most wicked, that was the word he used, the most wickedest people pursuing the most wickedest ends for the most wickedest means are going to produce these beautiful, what an interesting theory. Where the hell could they ever gotten that? Marx had 3 words to sum up the entire process of corporate capitalism. It was accumulate, accumulate, accumulate. And I like that quote because he's recognizing, he doesn't really go into it, he avoids psychology, and I usually do also, but I think it's time we have to treat some of these guys, put them on the couch or something. Since we can't put them on the guillotine, we have to, no, I didn't say that.
First thing is we have to inform ourselves about what's going on. What is Monsanto? Why do they do these things? Or why aren't these people being shot? You know, we have to ask those questions. No. Did I say that? I'm so tired.
Did I mention the mic was hot?
Yeah. Oh, I was on. Oh my God.
You're exploited, especially as a taxpayer. Who was it? Bacon. Which one? You know.
Oh, my pleasure. I just saw this, and it's like, I mean, he really. This is a thing I did not really know about it because I'd only read him. I haven't read by any means everything that he's written. I've read like a few books. You know, Against Empire, Super Patriotism. Like there were a couple others. He's not somebody he's not somebody I spent a huge amount of time with in terms of reading him. But I will say, like, very much a formative influence to saying, you know, to me when I was like 19, 20 or so, yeah, actually, what you're noticing about the way things work, other people have noticed it too, and there's an entire fucking literature around this stuff. And, you know, movements of people who want to actually improve things. And it's like, oh, well, I mean, okay, I know at least one of the things I want to do with my life then. So, enormously influential to me and apparently hilarious.
This is when you get old, you shouldn't stray from your notes. But some noted commentator who prefers not to be mentioned right now. He said, what the hell were we talking about? You know, it's happening to all of you too. I know.
This microphone has a mind of its own.
And during those...
Actually, young Parenti looks a lot like young Armin Müller-Stahl. If you look at Armin Müller-Stahl, which you'll remember as like the guy with the mustache in X-Files, who hangs out with Smoking Man, big mustache, German accent, sounds a lot like this, and is very subdued in the way he talks. But he got his start in East German movies. And when he was doing East German movies and TV back in the 60s and 70s, he looked a lot like young Parenti.
Years when he was doing that, that's what I hate about these things. You can't regulate your distance from the amplifier if you really want to get going. You can step back and shout, but this comes with you. During those years...
Okay, and it is time to wrap up for tonight. Thanks to everyone who joined in. I hope it was a worthwhile, interesting, and enjoyable stream for all of you. Please do feel free to share this if you'd like to just let more people know that it's around, and if you think there should be more of this in the world and you would like to support the stream, I always appreciate that greatly when nobody who can't should feel obligated at all, but if somebody who can does, that's always very much appreciated. It helps me keep going. And in any case, I will be back tomorrow at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And I don't even know what the fuck we're going to be talking about then, because this was the main thing I had planned for this week. So now I got to come up with a whole new thing. Anyway, there you go. Have a good